Welcome to the Best 5-Minute Wine Podcast. I'm your host, Forrest Kelly. From the seed to the glass, wine has a past. Our aim at the Best 5-Minute Wine Podcast is to look for adventure at wineries around the globe. After all, grape minds think alike. Let's start the adventure. Our featured winery is... We continue our conversation with Ken Schultz of Hidden Legend Winery. And that brings us up to the question, Ken, how often are you making mead?
In a winery, grapes come ripe in the fall. Of course, there's things to do all year, but that's called the crush. They harvest the grapes, they crush them, they press them, they get them in the tanks, and they ferment. And then they sit in the tanks for a while. Then they look to finishing the wines, and the whites come first, and they're usually in the bottle before Christmas. And then the reds sit all winter, and they're in the bottle by June. They really only make wine once a year, and that's during the fall. I make wine continuously. I buy honey 12 to 30,000 pounds at a time, and I am continually, if I get an empty tank, I fill the tank. That can be a couple of times a month. And so I don't have to once a year look up how I did it last year.
What kind of honey are you dealing with in Montana?
We have basically two types here in Montana. We have a wildflower honey in western Montana, I should say, up and down the western side of the Great Divide. We have 5 valleys, and there's probably 5 major producers of, say, 500,000 pounds a year. Most of it is wildflower, which used to be, before the state declared war on it, most of it was spotted knapweed. And then there's a fair amount of clover honey. And we use both, and we have 2 very distinct styles of mead that we make from each. And the clover honey here is entirely different. I grew up on clover honey in Ohio, and I thought it was drab. But here it's very exciting. The national blenders just take everything they can get their hands on and pour it into a big vat and fill honey bears. Oh, no, that's hard work.
Yeah, that's very complicated.
The reason you don't hear much out of beekeepers is because they're always working.
We've all had honey crystallize in the cupboard, and then with Montana winters, I imagine you get honey in all different varieties of stages and things. How do you deal with that?
Montana is second in the nation in honey production. When we get it in the drums, it's rock solid. It is barely filtered. There's bee parts floating around in there, and in raw honey, and that it sugars very quickly. So you can knock on it, it's like knocking on wood. So the first thing I have to do is strap a heater onto the drum and raise it, and I do it over a 4 or 5 day period very slowly to about 100 degrees, let it melt. No, I really try to be careful with the natural properties of the honey. I want it to come through in the mead, whatever those properties may be, magical or medicinal, and both played a big part in historical mead making.
Out of the whole process, what is your favorite part?
Going up to the mountain cabin and kicking back in front of the fireplace and having a horn of mead with friends.
Now you say a horn of mead. That just
horn.
That fits in
for
with
the advanced mead enthusiast. Yeah, we import horns from England, cups, mugs, and natural horns, just like in the 13th Warrior or Robin Hood or Game of Thrones. Yeah, 2 of my 3 sons are principals in the company, and a sort of a half son, young fellow that we took in at an early age and raised along with our boys, and my wife. So there's 5 of us principally. We say you have to be related to work here.
Will somebody answer that phone?
It's time, boys and girls, for our listener voicemail.
Hi, I was wondering, did anyone beside the Vikings drink mead?
At the risk of upsetting a Viking, I would have to say yes, only because mead is the oldest known alcoholic beverage in world history. However, I would say that the Vikings did enjoy mead the most. Thank you for listening. I'm Forrest Kelly. This episode of the Best 5-Minute Wine Podcast was produced by iHism. If you like the show, please tell your friends and pets and subscribe. Until next time, pour the wine and ponder your next adventure.
This is Doug Vincent with the podcast Walk and Roll Live, Disability Stories. In 1956, I contracted polio. Thanks to my loving parents, I've lived a full, rich life over the past 67 years. Join me as I share my journey and uncover inspiring stories of resilience. This podcast is a platform for survivors of disability and those who champion services for the disabled community. Tune in on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Let's walk and roll together on this incredible journey of strength and empowerment.